My name is Mohasin, and I am a student from Edinburgh who identifies as queer and a person of colour. My provocation is about how I facilitated celebration of the other through creating a club night called Mojxmma. Growing up with my intersecting identities, I often felt othered by society and unwelcome in majority spaces. This led me to create a club night specifically tailored for people of colour in the queer community. This club night differs from traditional clubbing spaces in Scotland as it was created with the intention to attract those who feel unwelcome in normal public spaces, and it focused on creating a sense of freedom and joy. People who belong to LGBTQI communities and ethnic minority communities often have to hide who they are and mask their true self to feel acceptance in society. However, music and movement are often used as an act of resistance to facilitate self-expression and radical self-love. Nightlife has played an important factor in the development of meaningful relationships and finding community for marginalised groups. In this provocation, I will discuss how community and self-acceptance can flourish when individuals are given the opportunity to express themselves in a safe space. Some questions that arose for me when I was thinking about Mojxmma in relation to the theme of this network was how can clubbing celebrate the other, and how can it be radical and political? I also thought about when bringing communities together, what makes a safe space and why is a safe space needed? So I hope to explore these questions and incite curiosity into those engaging with this provocation. When we think of clubbing, especially in the UK, negative connotations usually come to mind of drugs, drunkenness, and disorderly behaviour. In my experience, these stereotypes are not entirely incorrect, and that's why clubs didn't feel safe for me. And when you search Google Images for DJs, the typical images are of men. And there's nothing wrong with male DJs, but when the space is created mostly by one demographic, it's usually tailored for that demographic. I want to think more about the space in which DJing happens and how music can facilitate empowerment for people to be authentically themselves. DJing, like other musical pursuits, is a form of art and expression. At Mojxmma, I played music that predominates POC queer culture. I played queer artists of colour and I used tempos and beats that are common in voguing and queer ballrooms. And it's important for me to play this type of music, not just to spotlight those in the community, but to facilitate creating a safe space. As these artists share their stories through their music, their stories are relatable and inspiring to us. We can dance with each other, and with these lyrics, we feel in a place of acceptance. I also play music from other artists and music that wouldn't normally be associated with queer culture. For example, UK grime and American hip hop. Because although it's not usually made for us, we still enjoy it. However, the clubs that usually play this music are not safe for visibly queer or for femme presenting people. We want to dance, we want to get drunk, we want to let go, but we want to be safe, away from fear of discrimination and from the cis-het male gaze. The atmosphere I aim to create at Mojxmma is like your best friend's house party. We play your favourite songs, you're surrounded by people like you, and you feel safe and you feel accepted. The creation of safe nightclub spaces for queer people of colour has played an extremely important role in the LGBTQI community. These photos are from balls in the 1980s and 1990s in New York. The queer ballroom scene was created in the late 1890s and was popularised in the late 1900s by queer, Black and Latinx communities in the US. They provided a home for people who had been ostracised from their families and from society. Houses were formed in these spaces, which were chosen families for queer people who were homeless and had no biological family members to support them. This quote is from Cameron Saunders, a New York-based dancer and choreographer. It highlights the importance that ballroom had for the community. Ballrooms saved people's lives. It gave a space for people to be unapologetically Black, queer, Latinx, and trans. It helped those in poverty without education and without family to find support and solace in each other. During the AIDS epidemic, balls became a place for activism. People came together to raise awareness about AIDS and fight for justice, in a time where no one listened or cared about the lives of queer folk and queer people of colour specifically. A dance style called voguing was created within this scene, named after fashion magazine Vogue. Moves mirror model poses, and inspiration is drawn from gymnastics, miming, ballet, and martial arts. Willie Ninja, the godfather of voguing, describes it as an extension of throwing shade. People compete in balls using voguing and dance, and it can also be used as an alternative to physical fighting. In ballroom competitions, categories included Butch Queen, Executive Realness, Face, and Vogue. These categories gave people the opportunity to be what society told them they could not, whether that be a successful businessman, a runway model, or even simply someone masculine or feminine. Even though the reality for most of these people attending balls was poverty, homelessness, poor education, and lower life expectancies due to their socio-economic disadvantage, balls provided people that space to explore their fantasies and aspirations through costume and dance. You could be anyone or anything you wanted to be. In modern-day Western society, things are a lot better for our communities. Equality legislation means that queer people and people of colour are given better chances and can be successful and work in professional fields. So why in 2021 is a space like Mojxmma needed? Well, the flag on the screen is the Progress Pride flag, and it was created in 2017 by American civil rights activist Amber Hikes. The flag was created in direct response to the racial discrimination queer people of colour were facing in LGBT bars in Philadelphia. And this experience is not exclusive to Philadelphia. I myself did not feel comfortable as a queer woman and as a woman of colour in the majority of queer spaces that I entered. The clubs are catered for the majority within the minority, and that is white, cisgendered, homosexual men. You can assume when you go to a gay bar that there will not be any homophobia, but you can't assume that there will not be any racism or transphobia or sexism. And it might be a surprise that this kind of discrimination exists within our community. But a survey by Stonewall UK in 2018 found that 51% of LGBT Black, Asian and minority ethnic respondents had experienced racism within our community. This increased to 61% for Black LGBT people specifically. Disabled people as a group with pre-existing barriers to support and inclusion also face discrimination within the community, and LGBT clubs and events are often not catered for them, dividing the community further. Bisexual people are often dismissed as straight or still in the closet. Some people do not accept them as part of the community as they can pass as straight and might not face the same struggles as homosexual people. Transgender people also face discrimination within the community by those who do not believe that they should be included in the LGBT+ spectrum. An example of this is the LGB Alliance, who are a registered charity in the UK, and they actively promote trans-exclusionary rhetoric. And this brings me to the theory of intersectionality. This was introduced by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989 to explain how different aspects of social and political identity can intersect and compound discrimination. Crenshaw's initial example was using race and gender and how it affected Black women when they intersected. During the feminist and anti-racist movements, Black women were forced to choose a type of discrimination when making workplace complaints, as sexism was associated with white women and racism with Black men. By ignoring these intersections, Professor Crenshaw says significant numbers of people in our communities aren't being served by social justice frames because they don't address the particular ways that they're experiencing discrimination. We can see the examples of these intersections within the LGBT community. People with intersecting identities often code switch, masking parts of their identity to be accepted in specific spaces. We, as others, encounter those outside of our community by shape-shifting to what we feel is acceptable in that space. I think that recognising intersectional identities is the most important point. We are all multidimensional. We have our ethnicities, our cultures, religions, gender, sexualities, experiences, personalities, and our stories. When providing spaces to include others, we must realise that we all have different needs. The others are usually lumped together. We say the LGBT community for all gender and sexuality spectrums that are not cisgender or heterosexual. We use the term BAME or POC for anyone that isn't white. And this reduces our individuality to an acronym, and it kind of dispels any sort of freedom and inclusivity that we need to feel accepted. When you include a wide other group, you are met with issues because you're not specific enough. You will always attract the majority within the minority because the minority do not feel safe accessing that space. We can meet each other by catering for each other, listening to each other, and recognising minorities within marginalised groups. Providing communities with the tools to create safe spaces and platforms for us, by us, on our own terms allows us to feel safe enough to share our true self with others. There's no feeling like being in a room full of strangers, but feeling love, respect, and safety. And this can only be replicated in spaces which serve that purpose. And so I hope this provocation has helped you to think about how to be more inclusive in your work and helped you to understand the need of our communities. Thank you for listening.